back from recess. When we left off yesterday, we had dismissed the panel, and now we begin the round of amendments. To remind my colleagues about the rules of engagement, floor amendments must be submitted in writing to the clerk of the legislature and distributed on the floor. At this time, I would like to request that anybody with amendments to send them to the clerks for printing, and it has to be in the proper format. Does everybody have the amendments before them?
Just a point of information, well, not point of information, it's an inquiry, a question, Madam Chair. I have a couple of amendments. It's being forwarded to the clerks right now, or actually not the clerks, but legal to review right now, and then forwarded to the clerks for printing. Just another way of ensuring these amendments are correct or is not in question. So mine is coming. We're already sending it over. So is that okay, Madam Chair, that it goes to legal first and then from legal go to the clerks? Or do you want me to just send it directly?
You can send it to them for printing, but let's just go ahead and start with the sponsor of this bill. He has
thank you.
Several amendments to offer. Senator Sanaga Sr., recognized.
Yes, Madam Chair. I have 3 amendments. It's been circulated. It has gone through following your rules of engagement. And I will begin with my first amendment, which would be the amendment that says from line 16 to 17, page 5. To delete the lines 16 and 17 of section 77904 of section 2 on page 5, and it will read, it reads the total. Well, basically what it's doing is, okay, the total of amendments, it's on section A, the total of amendments credited against unpledged business privilege taxes for the GBC's preparation of facilities and participation in the FIBA Asia competition authorized herein shall not exceed $400,000 over a 2-year period. Striking out no more than $200,000 in tax rates shall be authorized for each year. Madam Chair and my colleagues, we've heard the testimony and they presented their budget. Their budget was very specific that they will exceed the $200,000 on the first year. So it was also revealed that it was at 240 that we're spending at UOG, and they may even go beyond that if there's more repairs that are needed. So it's to merge the 200,000 per year to one-time 400,000, and they might just exhaust that all, if not most of it, majority of it, and that's my proposal on that amendment.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any members that would like to speak on the amendment?
Madam Chair, I don't have the amendment in front of me yet. Is this line 16?
Brief recess, hold on.
Okay. Is this line 16?
We are back from recess. Senator Tello, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to know what line, what amendment we're on. I didn't have a copy of it in front of me. I'm still reviewing it at this moment, so I'll allow my other colleagues to speak on it. Thank you. I'd like to come back to it, though. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any members that would like to speak? Senator Castro, you're recognized.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the amendment proffered by Senator San Agustin, based in part on the testimony given by the GBC and other folks in terms of the accelerated rate for the T.1 project. So we saw how that was a project that they needed the credits in advance to be able to move forward with the major investments. One good example that required a major part of the capitalization was the sewage system. So that they just couldn't implement it. Also, we saw in the committee report, and as verbalized again last night, that the games are occurring as soon as next month, and there's a U15 tournament that's occurring either in 2021 and 2022. And so I would expect, based on what I thought I learned last night, that the accelerated investments would help prepare the team for those tournaments as well. So I support Senator San Agustin's proposed amendment as proffered. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Any other members that would like to speak on this amendment? Are there any objections? No objections? Motion carries. Senator San Agustin, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two other amendments, but I'll begin with, the first one is the amendment that is for line 9, page 7, to amend the bill to read, after the, if you look at line 9, after the word tax credit programs, it'll read, notwithstanding any other provisions of the law, GITA shall have the authority to incorporate and add rules and regulations necessary to process travel-related credits, which shall use at a minimum federal travel regulation as a basis for such rules and regulations. As we've all heard last night, that GITA was very specific, that they don't have rules, but they would be welcome to apply the federal travel regulations, which is consistent throughout the government of Guam.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any members that would like to speak on this amendment? You're recognized, Speaker.
Mananasitos, Madam Chair, thank you for giving me the opportunity to rise in support of this amendment as proffered by the good senator from Chico. I just want to say that after hearing the regulations that we have in GITA is not there. The following the federal travel regulations is in order. We've utilized that in several other programs, and I think that this amendment is good, and I ask that my colleagues support this effort.
Thank you, Speaker. Are there any other members that would like to speak on this amendment? Senator Terlai, you're recognized.
I like the part, thank you, Madam Chair. I like the part of the amendment where we're going to allow GITA to add rules and regulations necessary to process these travel costs. However, using the federal travel regulations as a basis, I'm still not sure why we are doing that when we are subjecting all the other government travelers to Guam travel regulations. And where the Guam travel regulations refer to federal, I mean, that's appropriate, but it still is, they're different, and I'm not sure of all the differences, and no one was able to really lay those out yesterday. So I would object to that. I would prefer we just have them use the same travel regulations that we are requiring everyone else in our government to use. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would amend make a motion to amend the amendment to where it says federal and just put Guam.
There's been an amendment to the amendment, so the amendment...
Sorry, government of Guam. Government of Guam.
So for clarification, the amendment to the amendment states that on the the fourth line, so it'd read, that use at a minimum Guam, Government of Guam travel regulations, is that what you're suggesting?
Madam Chair, point of information.
Yes, Senator San Agustin, you're recognized.
Guam follows the federal travel regulations. At the minimum, nobody flies first. I mean, that's why it's always been in the news. Why are they going first class? The standard is coach. You go economy, you don't go any further up by government expense. There's certain things that federal regulations prevents anybody from abusing and taking advantage of the government. But if you want to put the word Guam, I mean, what, Guam travel regulations? I don't know if there is one, but I know for a fact there is a federal travel regulation. I'm very familiar with that. 26 years in the military, I am very familiar with the federal travel regulations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator San Agustin, is that an objection,
That,
an amendment to the amendment?
that's correct. That's an objection to put the word Guam. I don't know what is Guam, but I know federal regulation does exist.
Okay. So there's been an objection to the amendment to the amendment. Are there any, like to call for the vote?
If I could just close on my amendment.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yes, there is, of course, Government of Guam travel regulations. That's what every employee of the government has to follow. In certain parts, they might mirror federal regulations, but I know that these have been developed and that they are being implemented all across the government. In fact, we in the legislature have added to the travel regulations that already existed. We've added other restrictions by our budget law, but I'm not sure, but I suspect that the Government of Guam travel regulations are stricter than the federal ones, or less. They're more frugal, is what I'm thinking, Madam Chair.
And thank you, Senator. Senator San Agustin, you're recognized.
Madam Chair, I can understand where my colleague, I guess, has no problem following in all the restrictions we do, but federal travel regulations is very strict. They're more strict than even Gov Guam or anywhere else. There are all kinds of measures put in place. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Okay, thank you, Senator San Agustin. Senator Tello-Taitigui.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for allowing me to at least chime in here. I know that the good senator from Jonia was closing, but allowing the previous senators speak. So thank you for allowing me just to chime in here. I think that, the stricter we are on travel is better. We are held accountable for any kind of travel. The taxpayers of Guam are watching us, making sure that we do adhere to that. But the federal government is the federal government. We're how many thousands of miles away from the United States that gear these restrictions based on their demographics. Guam is unique. We have our own rules and regulations based on where we're at today, the demographics. And as we see fit, like the good senator from Jonia mentioned, that we've even added more restrictions to it. So I think that we should support this amendment. And I do support it myself, so I'm asking my colleagues to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so there's been a request to repeat the amendment. So the amendment reads, the amended to the amendment reads, the tax credit programs, notwithstanding any other provision of law, GITA shall have the authority to incorporate and add rules and regulations necessary to process travel-related tax credits, which shall use, at a minimum, Government of Guam travel regulations as a basis for such rules and regulations. Okay, so there has been an objection to the amendment, I'd like to call for a vote. So those in favor of the amendment to change federal to the government of Guam, I'd like to call for the vote for that. Those in favor? Motion fails. So now we're back to the amendment with just the federal travel regulations. Are there any objections to this amendment? No objections? Motion carries. Senator San Augustine, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I met with the GITA folks, they asked that we'd also add on, my amendment is on line 10, page 7, is to add a new section 77908, Federal Travel Regulations. The Guam Basketball Confederation and the Guam Men's National Basketball Team shall utilize the federal travel regulations when procuring travel and travel-related services.
Okay.
Initially, Madam Chair and my colleagues, I had merged them both together, both the previous amendment that was passed and this one, and Gita asked that we keep it separate so that this section would actually impose that. Ensure it's followed.
Okay. Are there any members that would like to speak to the amendment?
The amendment says line 10, page 7, to add a new subsection, section 77908 to read. Does everybody have that? It's only 3 lines. It's a 3-line amendment. That's correct. Because they asked me to change because of the template from what I had first introduced before we went to Committee of the Whole to change it to the Committee of the Whole's template.
Moment recess. We have to pass out the copies. We're back from recess. Senator San Augustine, if you can restate your amendment, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Line 10, page 7, to add a new section 77908 to read, Section 7908, Federal Travel Regulation. The Guam Basketball Confederation and the Guam Men's National Basketball Team shall utilize the federal travel regulations when procuring travel and travel-related service. Just to quickly brief my colleagues, the initial amendment went in as such, or actually there was a combination of amendments that was developed, and then as I worked with the legal counsel and GITA, they were both merged with the previous amendment that was passed, and then GITA said, no, keep it separate. It's better to be separate because it's just in their best interest that it be separate, and it's in the best interest of the bill also. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator. Are there any members that would like to speak to this amendment? Senator Therese Jalahi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, resorting to the federal travel regulations is not common practice for the government of Guam. It's not explained why we're making this departure. We have an entire chapter in Title V of the Guam Code annotated that's titled Government Travel Law that lays out all the laws. In addition to other things, it allows for mileage earned to be put into the mileage bank for the use of medical and education purposes. And on top of that, Madam Speaker, the last amendment that we passed already authorizes GITA to make the rules and regulations regarding travel-related costs, and that they can use at a minimum the federal travel regulations. So I think this is departing from the prior amendment that was just passed, which allows GITA to be the one to make the rules and gives them the flexibility to use federal as a minimum, but not limit us to this. And I think that would allow GITA to make it more consistent with, practices across the government of Guam. So I would object to this and suggest to the author that it's not necessary considering the prior amendment that was already passed. So I object.
Thank
Madam
you,
Chair, I'll just, and I understand where my colleague's coming from, to be consistent, even though GITA recommended this, I will withdraw my amendment. So we don't have to debate that any further. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the motion to withdraw, are there no objections? Motion carries. A moment's recess.
We are back from recess. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to offer an amendment.
Please
It's
proceed.
on page 11, I'm sorry, on page 3, line 11. It reads, it's basically to amend section 77901A of the bill to read, A, to the extent that any business contributes to the Guam Basketball Confederation to acquire the related required equipment and make enhancements to facilities in Guam, it shall be entitled to credit of business privilege taxes that are not already pledged for any other purpose by Guam law. The basis for contribution to the project shall be the actual cost of the equipment and the services associated with the installation of equipment. Okay, the purpose of this amendment is, as you know, yesterday, GITA tax credits have not been provided for soft cost or travel or lodging. And this is the first time, if this bill should pass without this amendment, this will set a precedence for other sports-related activities. So by doing this, we're opening the door for other sports to ask for tax credits for lodging and transportation. And as you know, if a team is going away, the tax credits. I mean, the use of tax credits for. I mean, how does Guam benefit from such a thing if they're using this money for lodging elsewhere? I think it does set a precedence, a poor precedence. And considering that this money is going to be pledged ahead of any other thing that we appropriate in the budget, so we're looking at, should we not fund the hospital? Should we not fund education? Should we not fund the police? We're taking funds away from those necessary services in government. And I think it's important to raise this question and to really think about this policy that we're setting forth. I'm all in agreement for tax credits for infrastructure. I fully support that. I see that as an investment that's that can serve our community as a whole. But my question is, as far as transportation is concerned, and we did hear that they have sponsorships, and it looks like they can gain some money from the ticket sales. So there is opportunities to get funding. And I just think as a policy decision that this body makes, we need to be very careful about, by setting this thing in motion, we're opening the door for other things which could impact the services of our government. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Perez. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the amendment? Senator Taitigui, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'd like to make an amendment to this amendment. It's just very simple. Where it's on the third line where it says enhancements to facilities in Guam, I think we should spell this out. This is going to the University of Guam Field House. So instead of enhancements to facilities in Guam, I'd like to make enhancements to the University of Guam Field House.
Colleagues, there has been an amendment to the amendment by Senator Taitigui. On the third line of the original amendment, after the words "make enhancement to," insert University of Guam Field House and cross out facilities in Guam. Anyone who would like to speak to the amendment
Madam Chair.
Senator San Agustin, you are recognized.
This is an amendment to the main amendment, correct?
That's
Okay, I just want to make sure I stay focused on that. And it's correct. My colleague mentioned this bill is in reference to providing tax credit to the upgrade of UOG. It's not to Guam, even though it affects Guam, but she's correct. It's to UOG. So I'm in support of to changing it to UOG, University of Guam's, maybe even add field house to it, other than just University of Guam. So it's not just UOG in general,
Right.
It's specifically to the field house.
the amendment to the amendment. It is to insert the words University of Guam Field House.
Okay, I'm in support of that. That's consistent with the bill.
Senator Taitigui, would you like to adjust your amendment to make it read what the facility is actually titled as?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that the committee chair, I'd just like to use University of Guam Field House, Madam Chair. But if
Okay.
somebody wants to change it to its full name, then I have no problem with that
Okay.
at all. So.
Thank you. Senator Lee, you're recognized.
Just a point of information, Madam Chair, if the proffer of the amendment could just allow for legal to make the technical corrections, and we'll be square.
Okay, legal, we will make legal make the technical corrections as needed for the amendment to the amendment. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the amendment to the amendment? No? Are there any objections to the amendment to the amendment? Amendment passes. Now the original amendment as amended. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Senator San Agustin, you are recognized.
Madam Chair, I'd like to object to that where they striked out training and transportation. You know, my colleagues, let's understand, number one, as everybody kept talking about how the BBMR mentioned, we don't know what the impact is. This is new money. This is not money that we're collecting. When everybody talked about, we don't know what the budget is going to feel like. When this bill was introduced, it was after the budget passed. It's new money. When you, my colleagues, we always have to focus on number one. When we talk about new money, hypothetically, if you as a corporate donates to somebody, right, and then they procure services, new money generates new taxes, new revenue coming, money that was never known and never existed. And we also have to remind ourselves that when individuals, you all know this, when you donate to any nonprofit or anybody, you have a ceiling in your tax break within your own taxes. Anything beyond that, it's like just giving money away. A lot of these corporations are trying to find a way how they can continue to contribute. And if this is one way, then this is the way where we're going to get new money in the system that we've never seen. It was never projected that this money was ever going to exist anyway. So my objection is to striking out the training and transportation. They also mentioned last night, the team mentioned, it's promoting Guam. Everybody else promotes their team. We're not going to promote our international basketball team? I don't understand that. How do we say Team Guam, but we're not willing to even offer them and understand that the money that was budgeted for UG may grow from 240, may go up. The likelihood of going down is not likely. And they understood and admitted it, that the cost of their travel, they may have to find ways to seek other means of funding it, because remember, it's 400,000. The total budget says 440. They're already short 40,000. They may be short 50, maybe short 60. The 200,000 keeps getting smaller and smaller. And yes, they should fundraise. They should find out the sponsors. But to say we're not going to support you, I object to this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator San Agustin. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the amendment as amended? Senator Moylan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question for the author of the amendment. Understanding the point that was well made for the consideration of not including the transportation on this bill as part of the BBT tax credit amount. So I'm wondering if with this amendment, are we also saying that the amount of money requested in the bill, therefore, will be reduced by the amount that they requested for travel? Thank you.
Senator Perez, do you yield?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. Yes, that would, should this amendment pass, but the other thing is labor costs, so it's hard to tell what their actual costs could be related to the upgrades. So it would have an impact, but it's hard to really identify what the change would be directly.
Senator Moylan, does that suffice your inquiry?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on the amendment to the amendment? I'm sorry, amendment as amended. Senator Talahi, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to point out again the fiscal note by the Bureau of Budget and Management Research that states, the Bureau notes it is concerned that the use of tax credits will impact the government's ability to manage the finances of the government of Guam, as it will reduce the expected revenues due to the government. The filing of tax credits by the taxpayer will take priority over appropriations made in the annual budget process, which may impact government programs. When he says it's going to reduce the expected revenues, that means we're reducing by $400,000 according to this bill the expected revenues, and we've already appropriated those expected revenues to the full extent. And I mean, that's why he also says that it may impact government programs because it takes a priority over the money going to those appropriations. And that's really my only concern, is that it's a credit to your existing GRT obligations. And so you're going to be reducing the amount of what you pay to the government by, we're going to get less, 400,000, and we just have not accommodated for that in the appropriations side of the budget. And that's how it impacts. And I think it's not correct to say that we are not supporting the team if we make this amendment, because we're very much supporting the team, and we are trying to support the whole event. We've tried to support this development of basketball by $2.5 million, tax credits for Tizen, for the same foundation for the Tizen facility, the gym. And so, I mean, I think it's ideal, but I think, but I support the amendment, Madam Speaker, just because of the concerns of BBMR. This would reduce the, it would reduce the perhaps adverse impact on the current appropriations, and still allow for the improvements to be made and the event to be at the level that they have discussed with us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Chalahi. Does anyone else like to speak on the amendment as amended? Senator Calvo, you're recognized. Senator Castro, you are recognized.
You can go ahead and strike that from the record, clerks. It's Castro from Barragata as opposed to former Governor Calvo, but thank you for the compliment. I'm sorry, just for clarification, that was a good laugh among us. I appreciate that, Senator Nelson. I will return that. Just for point of information, so I was in discussion on the main amendment. Could you repeat for my benefit the amendment to the amendment?
Yes, okay, so the amendment to the amendment reads in the third line, after make enhancements to, we insert University of Guam Fieldhouse, which legal will correct if it's conflict in the matter of name, and we will cross out facilities in Guam.
So to be clear, we're discussing the strikeout from as well as training all the way to 2021?
That's correct.
Okay, so I'd like to contribute to the discussion just by, pointing out again that we had I thought was a pretty healthy discussion on the multiplier effect of just one of those championships, the U17 that happened, 2 years ago. And then the discussion went on to talk about the anticipated U15 in 2022. If you remember the numbers associated with that, and there's a hard copy somewhere here on file, there were two specific figures, one at 1.3 million and another one at 1.3 million. That'd be the traveling delegation and then the visitors expenditure. Even if you looked at it from a GRT perspective, assuming this is a big assumption that they paid into the coffers 5%, you would have recovered that already just from those two experiences. And so if we're looking at lost revenue, I look at it from another perspective. I really see it as an opportunity for an investment to get twice the return, if not more than that, exponentially, not just today or this fiscal year, but for years to come. And I think they did a good job capturing that and enumerating that in their handout, in their economic study. In addition to that, I think it's noteworthy to remind my colleagues that in reality, while this is a dollar amount associated with investments in both facilities and an entire organization, there really is a lot more at stake here. You're talking, as I tried to point out last night, about the human infrastructure, the human capital that goes into this, the tens of thousands of hours that people put into this organization to keep it afloat. And I guess my last point would be, Madam Chair, is that it was explicit. There was no ambiguity that this is a participate to reciprocate opportunity. And if we were to pull the rug from this organization in terms of disallowing them to travel, with this tax credit, as my colleague pointed out so aptly, that this is not money currently experienced or realized by the government, but if we pulled the rug out from them and forced them to have to scramble now to raise well over $100,000 in travel expenditures, this is an adult team we're talking about. People, as they mentioned last night, that have full-time jobs, probably have, they're probably full-time caregivers as well in terms of dependents, whether they're children or elderly parents at the home, right? So they don't have the privilege and the luxury of going out and raising money after work and on weekends like some other organizations do. And so my point to that third point would be this. If we don't do well in supporting this entire proposition as it's presented by the prime author, I really think we'll be losing out on a long-term opportunity to finally make good on decades-old promise of growing a sports tourism industry in Guam insofar as basketball is concerned. Now, I don't have all the details here, but I will want to remind the body again, in the last 2 terms I had the privilege to serve, we've done this numerous times. There is ample historical legal precedent for other organizations that have, maybe by way of administrative governance over GovGuam lands, that would allow them to go into long-term leases with other organizations that are well-funded. Keep in mind that those organizations extend a tax credit for those kinds of investments to be done in capital improvement projects. So if this team doesn't go, if we don't provide the necessary funding for them to go, I think we're losing out on a major opportunity to grow the economy, not just immediately with the immediate expenditures when they land here and spend in the hotels and get the catering and all that associated activity. I'm talking long term. But then let me close with this. Let's remind ourselves in the investments we made just recently. I'm not trying to pit one priority over another. I think they're all equally important, whether it's the proliferation of the Chamorro arts and culture or the establishment of a new industry by way of sports tourism. And so I plead and I compel my colleagues to stand firm in allowing this tax credit to be applied for this single year. Now, if it doesn't come through and the returns are not there after this happens, then let us come back and then hold these individuals and organizations accountable, and let us be a pound wiser in not making the same kind of mistakes in the future. But as I will close on the main motion, I will make a case for the credibility of not just the GBC, but all the associated parties, to include the University of Guam. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Castro. Senator Kelly Marsh Tyson, you are recognized.
Sujus Masi. Madam Speaker, excuse me, Chair. So I want to bring up, and I hesitate in a sense to say point of personal privilege, but because with the previous speaker, I appreciate the points that he was making. These are many of the exact same points that apply to something that we were looking at last session. We're talking about continued interaction with a larger network, with a larger entity. We're talking about multiplier effect as a result of participating, and that one has to reciprocate if one holds events. It can't just be that we hold events and we get the economic benefit and everybody else just has to do without. We have to reciprocate. But the part I wanted to clarify, because there can be the possibility of misinterpreting what the previous speaker was saying, was that when we're speaking of the arts and culture, especially as we were working on it last session, we were and are dealing with a percent for the arts money that is bound legally and contractually specifically for the arts. It's not coming out of money that would normally go to the general fund. So I just wanted to distinguish that and clarify that it's similar in many ways. It benefits our economy. We do need to reciprocate in order for those benefits to continue to accrue. Those parts are very similar. But where it does differentiate is this is tax credit money whereas the other was money set aside in law that is legally and contractually bound for the arts and the culture and comprises a very, very small percent of the overall money that comes into our island. Anyways, thank you for letting me provide that clarification.
Point of information, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kelly Marsh Teichner. Senator Castro, yes?
Point of information, and perhaps the retiring speaker can clarify for me. I agree with the statements made, but my request for inquiry would be, it's a small percentage for the arts of a much larger qualifying certificate reprieve, right? So could you answer, if the retiring speaker would yield to my question, yes, that investment is from certain amounts set aside to proliferate the arts, but that was conditional upon a much larger qualifying certificate for an amount in the millions. Is that a factual statement? Can I get a response?
Senator Kelly Marsh Teichner, would you like to?
Susan Esmacia, I think that gets off the substance of where we're going, and the previous speaker and I are much in agreement. The amount that is set aside and actually goes to the culture of the arts and humanities agency is determined by the owner of that entity. It doesn't have to go to them at all, but it's something that they have chosen to do. I don't believe for that particular qualifying certificate it was in the millions, plural, but it was a significant amount, and then a certain amount of it did go to, by the choice of the owner, they chose to, amongst different choices, to go there to provide it specifically to CAHA.
Thank you, Senator Marsh Teichner. Senator Castro, does that suffice to your point of inquiry?
Yes, I think we agree. We both agree in that regard.
Thank you. Senator Teichner, you are recognized to the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I think that I appreciate the amendment that was made here by the good senator from Barragata Heights, and I think we should be cautious moving forward on this bill. I mean, I understand the importance of supporting sports tourism and what it yields back to us. In fact, I had a conversation with Mr. Calvo regarding this one U17 Oceania Championship and what it yields, and the conversation about the one that's coming up in 2021 with the same kind of Oceania Championship with under the age of 15, where he says this type of competition does generate quite a bit of money, but and he said that though they don't know the amount of what it would yield on Guam as a force multiplier here on economic growth for this particular competition, because a lot of the money is going off island. They didn't have an example of that, but they did have the one for the younger kids, the Oceania Championship. And he says, by far, that makes more money than the adults in the basketball tournament. But I do appreciate the amendment. I see that there's trying to be fiscally responsible, and I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Teichner. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the amendment as amended? Senator Moylan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You just reminded me maybe legal will want to look into the amendment to the amendment, but I'm not sure about the technical word for the University of Guam. Is it the University of Guam Calvo Fieldhouse, or is it just the University of Guam? Maybe legal can verify that as well. Thank you for reminding me, Madam Chair.
On page 2, on line 13 in the bill, it's the University of Guam Calvo Fieldhouse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd just like to make a comment on the amendment as well. I appreciate that we are considering on this amendment as amended to look at the cost of travel authorization for this business tax credit, which, by the way, is at 5% forever. And I'm just wondering, considering our economy now and understanding the reports that we are given, and especially that the reports indicate that we're over 10.7 million in increased snapshot of our projections, which is a good thing. But now, depending on how you look at it, it could be excess or not excess. And so I'm wondering, is this what we really want to tell our taxpayers that we can consider, even though if it's a good thing and a revenue-generating thing, should it be considered this non-excess or excess money to be spent on travel? So I'm in support of what the bill will provide and repairing the University of Guam much-needed repairs of the field house, which has been neglected. Or originally, the original wood is still there when I graduated back in 1985 from UOG. And it will provide sports activities, and especially for this game that we're looking to host. And it will probably provide a better or a more eloquent or the right setting for probably a lot of cultural events as too. But if we're not looking at reducing our taxes, then maybe we should be very sparingly using what excess we do have. So I support the amendment to exclude the transportation on this bill and the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the amendment as amended? To the amendment? No? Senator Tydegui, would you like to close on your amendment? I'm sorry, Senator Sabina Perez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think, really, this is a bigger issue. It's more than just supporting the Guam Basketball Confederation, which I think is important to do. But I think the bigger issue is, do we open the door for tax credits for transportation and lodging, considering that we're looking at, we have to fund the services that are critical to our island. And we've been through many public hearings regarding the hospital, regarding our schools. And so we have to pause and think about, what are we sacrificing at this point? And this opens a door to future tax credits for other sporting activities. So I think it's a bigger policy decision that has to be made. In regards to, will it pull the rug from under this activity? And the answer, I think, is no. I mean, you heard yesterday that they were able to go to all these tournaments. And it doesn't mean it's a zero-sum game. And there was also an alternate way that was provided by one of our colleagues here on a different way that this could be achieved without having to go to use this for transportation. So there are other ways, there are other mechanisms that can be used to pay for transportation, but I'm just thinking that, not to use tax credits. I think that's where I think is important, to use tax credits for infrastructure and rather than the soft costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Perez. Senator Castro?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can appreciate the retiring speaker's comments. I really can.
Are you rising to a point of information?
So my point of information would be this. I'm of the opinion, but I could be wrong, that we also fund travel for competition, whether it's athletic or academic, and whether it's locally appropriated to the Department of Education, or whether it's the use of federal grant monies. If the retiring speaker can answer that, is that an accurate statement? So my question is trying to differentiate for myself.
So are you in a point of inquiry?
Point of inquiry. So I like that if the retiring speaker would answer, because I'm trying to differentiate tax credits versus direct appropriation. My qualm is not with either, but I think the issue is that we're funding it this way, and I would prefer this way than a direct appropriation. So local versus federal monies that already fund competitions, whether it's academic or athletic or otherwise.
Senator Perez, do you yield?
Yes, I yield. I think the appropriations process is a responsible way of managing this because we know how much money we have to allocate. And I think, if we're giving tax credits, it's going outside of that effort. I think appropriations is a responsible way of doing this versus through tax credits. In regards to, tax credits for these other travel, I think, we have to put it before the body because if we're taking away funding for teachers or we're taking away funding for, anything that's, needed, that should be discussed rather than, basically what this tax credit does, it gets paid off first before anything else is given to our agencies, to our community. So I think, the appropriations is the responsible approach versus the tax credit.
Okay, I'm going to call the vote now. To the amendment as amended, Senator Perez's amendment. All those in favor to the amendment as amendment? I'm sorry, correction, are there any objections to the amendment as amended? There has been an objection. All those in favor to the amendment as amended? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Motion fails. Senator Perez, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So the third amendment that I have to offer is to amend Section 77904A of the bill to read, A, the total amount of credits against unpledged business privilege taxes for the Guam Basketball Confederation's preparation of facilities and participation in the FIBA Asia competition authorized herein shall not exceed $250,000 over a 2-year period. So this is based on the budget provided, and it's based on the infrastructure needs of the Guam Basketball Confederation. So this is what the basis for this particular amendment. And similar in vein to the previous amendment that I offered, it's about keeping costs contained, and it's an investment as well. So I agree, I support the investment into our facilities. So this is where I would like to, this is the reason why I'm offering this amendment.
Is there anyone that would like to speak on the Perez amendment? Senator San Agustin?
Madam Chair, I'm trying to find which amendment is it? Was trying
Line
to follow.
12, page 5. To
Line
amend
12,
this.
page 5?
That's correct. To amend the section 77904 alpha of the bill to read, A, the total amount of credits against unpledged business privilege taxes for the GBC's preparation of facilities and participation in the FIBA Asia competition authorized herein shall not exceed, and this is where the change occurs, to $250,000. So we line out the word $400,000, the number 400,000, over a 2-year period, and we cross out again, no more than $200,000 in tax credits shall be authorized for each year of the program.
Madam Chair, I'm trying to find it. I have a bunch of amendments that
Okay, we'll take a quick recess.
but not only that, ma'am, but okay.
We are back from recess. Senator San Augustine, I believe we left off at you. So would you like to speak to the amendments?
The amendment that was proffered to reduce the 400,000, 250, no, I object to this amendment, and to speak to it, it's automatically removing the travel. It's got to be focused on that. We got to realize that the 250 is just UOG's field house. So I can't support this amendment, and I'll like to, hold on to my time and speak later as folks speak about it.
Thank you, Senator San Augustine. There has been an objection to the amendment. The amendment is on line 12, page 5. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the amendment? No. There has been an objection to the amendment. I will call a vote. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Amendment fails. I think that's...
Senator Tello, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have an amendment in front that I would like to proffer to my colleagues, but they're passing it out right now. So, Madam Speaker, if I may, I believe my colleagues should have it in their hands as we can read along. This amendment is on line 9, page 6, to add a new 77901F to the bill to read. F, notwithstanding any other provisions of law, any business that contributes to the Guam Basketball Confederation to acquire the required equipment and make enhancements to the University of Guam Caval Fieldhouse facility in Guam, as well as the training and transportation of the Guam men's national team for FIBA Asian competition from 2019 to 2021, shall receive a credit of business privilege tax that are authorized and available pursuant to Article 6 of Chapter 77, Division 2, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated. Any business that contributes to the purposes authorized herein during FY 2020 shall not receive a credit of business privilege tax for said fiscal year, but shall receive a credit of business privilege tax for FY 2021 and or FY 2022 as applicable. Tax credits shall not exceed $250,000 for the required equipment and enhancements of the UOG Caval Fieldhouse and $100,000 for training and transportation of the Guam men's national team for the FIBA Asian competition from 2019 to 2021. Madam Chair, it was brought up during the public hearing about a bill that was passed into law that allowed the Guam Basketball Federation to receive $2.5 million to assist them to the renovations of the T.1 gym. But it was stipulated in that law that the money shall come to them every year for 10 years at $250,000. No doubt that they have done a great job in refurbishing the gym, the T.1 gym. In fact, Madam Speaker, we are on their sixth year of utilizing those tax credits that was afforded to the Basketball Association. In fact, they have a balance for this year, FY19, of about $92,000 left over. Now next year, for FY 2021, they're going to receive another $250,000. And then the following after that, 2022, they will also, excuse me, receive another $250,000. And then 2023, they'll receive another $250,000. So, Madam Chair, this is money that's down the line that they're going to receive later on to fix the facility. Many of my colleagues had an opportunity to visit the facility at T.1 and saw the improvements made. And as they mentioned, they plan on expanding that to an outside facility. But right now, the association, Basketball Confederation, who basically is the oversight of the T.1 gym, is looking forward to participating in the Asian Games, or in the FIBA Asian Cup qualifiers. We understand the importance of sports tourism, no doubt about it. We also understand that we need to take care of our own here on the island and providing great facilities, safe facilities for our people to enjoy any kind of sport or activity. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Madam Chair, that the U17 Oceania Championship is going to come to Guam. This one is under 15, so it'll be the U15. It's obvious this money at the University of Fieldhouse is going to be very helpful, not only to the community, but as well as the Basketball Association, because they're the ones that host these events. And what better place to host this is at the University of Guam Fieldhouse, where with this $250,000 that we're appropriating, actually they only asked in the budget $240,000, Madam Chair. And I'm looking at this at $250 for that little extra leeway that has been mentioned many times that they probably didn't foresee on the cost. And I asked them to make sure that when they have this MOU in place with the University of Guam, that they would be able to utilize this for upcoming events where they can't use at the T.1 gym. Then I asked the panel about utilizing the funding from T.1 gym and giving them an example that they're not going to see that money for the next 3 years, the full amount for the next 3 years. So utilizing the funding that they have right now, which was given $2.5 million to the Guam Basketball Confederation for T.1 gym, they have about $1 million, a little shy of $1 million in tax credits available right now. And then I mentioned that, to be fiscally responsible, which I know that the people of Guam is looking at us right now to try and do both. If we can support sports tourism, support our Guam team, that's great, but let's do it responsibly and not put us in a deficit, or most especially, Madam Chair, one of our agencies is going to be out $400,000. $400,000 is quite a bit of money for some of these agents, especially since we did some cutting to their budget. My recommendation then was to utilize this money that they already have. And this is a budget year. This is a budget time. We all just received from our governor of Guam the budget. Just last night at 7:14, I received mine. This is an opportunity for us to replenish that account of tax credits in this upcoming budget, FY 2021. This is an opportunity for us to do that and do it responsibly so that none of our agencies are going to be shortchanged, and that we are physically responsible enough to realize that what we're doing today, if this should pass the way it is not fiscally responsible. However, we all agree about supporting sports tourism, and this is a mechanism and an avenue to do that, where during the budget, we can make whole again Tizon. If this amendment should pass, Madam Chair, I have another amendment to spell that out clearly. And that amendment would allow the GBC to utilize these tax credits from Tizon for the FY 2011 and then FY 2021 for $250,000, and then the FY 2022 utilize $100,000. Now, why am I putting $100,000 when their budget said $200 for travel? First, Madam Chair, if you do the math, this bill is for $400,000. The request by the Guam Confederation is asking for actually more than that. They're asking for $440,250. So we're willing to give tax credits of $400,000. Then during the panel, they announced to us that on their jerseys, it's not only going to say Guam basketball team, it's now going to say Bank of Guam basketball team, or just Bank of Guam on their jerseys, because they received $30,000 from Bank of Guam as sponsorship. And then further on, it was discussed on the ticket sales and the concession stands. And I asked Mr. Calvo, how much do you anticipate from the sales of those? And he said over 20,000, between 22 to 25,000, or I said about almost 25,000, and he said yes, but to be conservative, I'm just clocking that in at 20,000. So that's a minus of another 50,000. So that's why I came up with 100,000. Now, we all know that the next game, the last game of this tournament is going to be February 2021. Actually, 2 games will be in February of 2021, and the cost of that alone is $90,000. Then another game, the home game, is in November 2020. Now, just so that everybody knows, they're not able to refurbish the gym on the flooring of the gym. That's going to take time. What they are doing is a quick Band-Aid fix by incorporating additional lights, fixing the lines, and I'd like to thank the Department of Parks and Recs for assisting them in trying to get the gym up to par by February 23rd.
Madam Chair, point of order. I don't want to interrupt, but point of order. I understand our amendment, but we seem to be fishing around on everything else. If we can just stick to what our amendment is and not have to tell us a story, we were all present last night, and we can just move on. Thank you.
Senator Sonagosine, I believe the speaker was talking about how she arrived at the 100,000. So it is consistent with the amendment.
It's consistent when we're talking about everything else, about GBC, when it was already mentioned last night, Madam Chair, that they couldn't afford to move the credits. Gita said that's a separate issue, and that's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
Thank you.
take it into consideration. Thank you, Senator.
you.
Senator Taitigui, we have
I'm almost done, Madam Chair.
time limit.
Yeah, thank you. I'm almost done. And though not all of us was here last night, I'm just trying to reiterate what was said for those who weren't here, and definitely for those in the listening audience, so they understand exactly what we're doing, because it is their money that we're dealing here with. So, Madam Chair, as I explained about the 100,000 and how I came up to that 100,000, and based on the math put together, that's for the travel section of it. But once again, Madam Chair, I don't think any of us here do not support sports tourism. We all do. But let's be fiscally responsible about doing so, and that we don't set precedents. Most especially, don't set precedents moving forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Taitigui. Are there any members that would like to speak to this amendment? Okay. Are there any objections to this amendment? Okay, objection. Are there anybody who would like to speak to the objection? Yes, Senator Nelson.
I would like to make an amendment to the amendment, Madam Chair.
I will allow this, yes.
Because this amendment addresses a certain section of the bill, I believe that the travel costs that is required is $200,000 for three different games. And they're flying to far off areas. It's not like they're flying to the mainland. Flying to New Zealand is rather expensive, and also to Australia. So I'd like to make an amendment to the amendment to read on the third line, instead of $100,000, to put $200,000.
A point of information, Madam Chair, it's not 3 games. If you flip over to, I think the printout that was provided last night only showed 3 games. Actually, Madam Chair, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games. Just a point of information.
Yes, okay, so the cost of Australia W2 home game will be $6,000. Ground transportation is $1,000, hotel is $3,000, meals is $1,500, and miscellaneous expenses is $500. New Zealand away game, February 2021 is $60,000 total. Australia away game, February 2021 is $30,000 total. And I believe we heard a discussion about the effort to try to save money. So from New Zealand, they're going to fly straight to Australia for the next away game. So that's what I mean by 3 games. I know that they'll be playing other games while they're there, but 3 areas that we'd have to fund for transportation. And that total came up to $200,000. So I'd like to make an amendment to read $200,000 on the third line for training and transportation for the Guam men's national team. And then that would be all. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So, sorry, to clarify, your amendment is to change 100,000 to 200,000?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, does any member would like to speak to this amendment to the amendment? Senator Taitigui, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, even though that the travel is for 3 different locations, as the good senator mentioned, there is also airfare incorporated into the home games. And these are, they've incorporated airfare for $16,000 for the home game on Guam, 8 packs, and the home game airfare was 8 packs again for the Hong Kong home game, as well as the home game, as well, actually, the home game for Australia, they have 20 packs, 20 individuals, but that was a 0 amount. Australian, okay, they didn't put any, okay, sorry, I stand corrected. It was just 2 other home games that do have the air packs.
Just a point of information. I believe then we're looking at 2 completely separate handouts, but they are both titled Total Team Guam Expensive 2020 and 2021 FIBA Asia Cup. The home game, yeah, so we're looking at completely 2 lists. So that's what I'm referencing. But in all, the total summary, even for the one that the previous senator was mentioning, is still $200,000.
Can I take a short recess, Madam Chair? I'm looking at one sheet, and she might be having another one. I'd like to verify the 2. Okay.
Short recess. We're back from recess. Senator Nelson, I believe you had the floor.
Okay, I just want to make a correction to the amendment that I am proffering. The amendment to the amendment, instead of $200,000, I'd like to make it $150,000. Yeah, so it should read $150,000 for training and transportation of the Guam men's national team.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Are there any?
And then, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion for recess to 2:30.
Okay. We are now We are under recess. We will return at 2:30.